Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's conversation. My name is Dr. Carla Thomas. I'm the president and founder of the Realized Leadership Group. And today we are extremely excited to host a quick 1-hour session where we're talking about empathy. And so we have a panel of really amazing speakers, as well as a phenomenal moderator who will be leading today's conversation. As we get into the discussion, please recognize that this is meant to be a community space. Meaning that feel free to raise your questions, feel free to raise your comments, either via the Q&A feature that's available in Zoom, or you can submit to chat. Either one is an option. But as this is a discussion that we have been entertaining actually for much of the last year in various ways and various means, please recognize that a copy and a recording of this is available if you are interested. You'll receive an email after today's session inviting you to sign up if you'd like to receive a recording of today's event. But without further ado, let me take a moment to introduce our moderator for today's conversation. He goes by D'Angelo Crane. His preferred pronouns are he, him. And I'm really excited for him to engage in a conversation because we have so many excellent panelists, practitioners, scholars who are coming at this conversation around empathy from so many different ways. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, D'Angelo, as we get into the discussion around what happened to empathy.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Carla, and the Realized Leadership Group for having me today, and also to my good friend Tanya, who I affectionately call Dr. Oprah O'Neill. And if you've worked with her, you know how she feeds into people. So thank you all for having me here today. I think Tanya would tell you that I love to talk about empathy because it's something that's definitely needed for today's leaders to be successful in the workplace. And we witnessed that last year as we experienced COVID, racial trauma, and even as we looked at the political landscape, right, we had to really think about what happened to empathy and how important it was in the workplace. This subject is so near and dear to me because probably about 6 years ago, I was working in Charlotte, North Carolina, and a young Black male was shot by the police. And of course, the city was in an uproar, as they should have been. And I remember my leader calling me to start a one-on-one, and she didn't start it with talking about business. This white female leader started with, "How are you doing?" And she was referencing the fact that she knew I lived in this neighborhood, in this community of Charlotte, and that this was going on, and she was watching it on the national stage. And she knew that we couldn't go on with this conversation with me talking about my one-on-one or the work that I was doing within the organization without talking about how I may have personally been impacted with what was going on around me. And that is what empathy is all about. Empathy is all about being aware, or looking for awareness, or understanding of things that you may not be familiar with. And then we have this continued conversation on how do we get to compassion? What's the difference between compassion and empathy? Well, empathy is having that feeling and reaching out, and compassion is then going the extra step and saying, what more can I do of this situation? So I'm excited today that we're talking about empathy, because when I think about the leaders, that leader in particular, who have really impacted my life, it's been those who have shown me some very deep empathy. And I've taken that with me as I've held leadership roles throughout my life as well. So let me go in and introduce you to our panel, because they are some dynamic women. I will tell you, to be here with them, I'm like, oh my goodness gracious, you all invited me with this panel. So I'm gonna go ahead and let you know just a little bit about each of them. Summer Joy Poole is currently pursuing her doctorate education at the University of Pennsylvania. Shaped by her values of inclusion and empathy, Summer's goal is to help organizations grow stronger by making strategic investments in their workplace. Summer has practiced and mastered communication and people development skills across multiple sectors, including entrepreneurship, federal government, nonprofit organizations, and healthcare. She's an experienced people strategist and an International Coaching Federation advanced practitioner. Summer's life mission is to transform cultures into embracing villages where teams can overcome obstacles, reveal blind spots, and accomplish all things when fueled by warmth of belonging. Summer was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, and is a proud mother of 2 curious and joyful boys. Welcome, Summer. Also, we have with us today is Larissa Thomas. She's a seasoned executive business leader with extensive success in reinventing global organizations through change management, business transformation, enterprise planning and talent development and succession planning. Her strong emphasis on the people side of transformation enables her to lead enterprise transformation strategies that ensure lasting, scalable change across financial services, information services, and technology industries. Throughout her career, she served multiple Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 companies in leading high visibility, high impact programs and initiatives across all functions. Her understanding of the industry value change and core business processes enables companies to maximize the use of their organizational culture, introduces new ways of working and business and drives business value and enterprise. Welcome, Larissa. Also, Dr. Whitney Graves, who is from my hometown of Louisville, Kentucky. She is the Chief of Operations at Melanated Healthcare and is a practicing family nurse practitioner. She has a science in nursing with a concentration on family health and a doctorate of nursing practice from Frontier Nursing University. She's currently providing COVID testing for the UPS international pilots, which I think is so interesting, and diagnosing and treating patients with mental health disorders. She is dedicated to serving the community and patient focus with the proven strengths in holistic patient healthcare and patient advocacy. She has a variety of experience ranging from primary care to sexual health to home care. Welcome, Whitney. And lastly, we have here Felice Tylon. Felice, tell me if that last name is wrong there. My apologies on that. And she's the president of Group Rose Consulting. She's an author, professor, executive coach, and consultant. She's an associate adjunct professor in the Graduate School of Education at the University of Pennsylvania and is president of Group Rose Consulting, LLC, where she focuses on executive coaching, organizational change, and leadership development. She is the executive director of Coaching Leadership Program, which takes multi-model approach to executive coaching. She also holds a PhD in organizational development from Temple University. She serves on the Lower Moran Human Relations Commission, and her most recent book publication includes the Interprofessional Healthcare Team, Leadership and Development, 2nd edition. So you can see this is just an amazing panel of powerful expert women here. So I'm so glad that you all have joined us. So let's dive in. So I think you all are going to come on the screen with me so we can get to talking here, right? Okay, great. So let's just start off with our first question of today. And this is for all of you to really answer this question. Tell me, how would you define empathy?
If I can jump on in, this is Whitney. I found a really good quote by Daniel Pink that describes empathy. And it says, empathy is about standing in someone else's shoes. You're feeling with his or her heart. You're seeing with his or her eyes. And not only is empathy hard to outsource or automate, but it makes the world a better place. And that's how I feel about it. It's about connecting with others, being aware of yourself and others in our place in society, in the world as a whole, and being able to connect with each other and come together for a common goal, which should be to uplift everybody in the community.
Okay. Summer?
It's hard to follow Whitney. I do agree with what she just said. My definition is it's simple. It's the ability to understand and share feelings and needs. It's a conversation about how we feel, which most people don't really have experience with articulating their feelings or matching those sensations in their bodies that they have to actual feeling words. And then the next step would be to connect those and decipher those feelings, to ask ourselves what is being needed at this moment. And I actually think of it as the anti-venom for loneliness and depression.
I'll jump in after Summer. I love that anti-venom, Summer. I'm gonna use that at work. In addition to what Whitney and Summer said, I think I would just add to that and say, and refrain from judgment. So it's the ability to feel and understand what people are experiencing. But in the world we live in today, driven by social media, I think refraining from judgment is important in articulating and expressing empathy. Because the moment you start to provide what I think and what I do, when you're trying to share empathy, it takes the lens and focus off the other person. Empathy is about putting yourself in another person's shoes and trying to understand the sentiment and experience they're having without adding your own personal lens to it. You're just supposed to be present for the other person. So refraining from judgment is what I'd add to what Summer and Whitney said.
Yeah, Larissa, I love that. I think that's when you think about being a good ally, right? It's about understanding what the other person's needs are. So you're exactly right on that. Felice, what do you think about this?
So that's great. So just to add a little bit, I don't know, I love what everybody said already. I think that empathy. So here's the funny thing about empathy. It's like I could give you what the literature says about empathy, but the reality is we know empathy when we feel it. Like we know it when somebody else is empathizing with us, and we know it when we're empathizing with somebody else. So I do want to talk a little bit about the definition in a way, but I do think that we all know it. And one of the kinds of empathy that kind of reveals how natural and real empathy is to the human experience is somatic empathy. So that's kind of when somebody's crying. Have you ever done this? When somebody's crying and you don't even know why they're crying and you start crying. And the opposite is somebody's laughing. There's a video with all these people on a train laughing. It was an experiment, and somebody walks onto the train and all these people are laughing and they're looking at them like, what are you, nuts? But within about 5 minutes, that person's laughing too, because there's like there's a brain connection with empathy. So I think that it's really innate in our human experience, and it's a matter, and I think as people were saying this, of, when you were saying suspend judgment, Larissa, that was so great, because it's kind of like if you can open up and like kind of clear the windows, empathy is there. So I think it's a human experience.
Okay, I want to dive into that just a little bit more, and I'm going to commit to everyone that I'm going to slow down. I already got a note that I'm talking fast as I normally do, so I'm going to slow down just a little bit and go back to my Kentucky roots of kind of easing into it here. So talk to me a little bit more, and this is for Summer and Felice. When you, and anyone else who wants to chime in as well, when you think about the definition of empathy, does it change when you think about it in terms of personally or professionally?
Summer, do you want to jump in or do you want me to?
Go, Felice.
All right. I kind of agree with you. Yeah, it is the same. I mean, I think we're holistic human beings, and empathy is there at work, it's there at home. I do think people struggle sometimes at work, and I have seen it as an executive coach. Leaders particularly struggle between the balance of empathy and their professional and their need to kind of fulfill the business and performance goals. So like, satisfying the board of directors and having empathy for employees. So it is a balance. It shows up in both ways. It shows up in sometimes ignoring and not really being empathetic because you're overly focused on business goals. And it shows up in another way where you're overly focused on not giving people feedback because you're overly focused on not wanting to hurt someone's feelings, even if giving them feedback is going to be helpful. So I think the workplace adds an additional complexity in that most workplaces have some sort of profit motive or some sort of goals that they need to achieve, regardless of the human beings that make that happen.
I would agree completely with Felice on that. No difference at home, work, and play. It's all the same thing. I do think there's a confusion around what sympathy is and what empathy is. And Brene Brown has a wonderful short, if you haven't seen it, where she defines the difference between the two. But really, empathy is a heart connection, right? It's the presence. It's like, I was teaching my 7-year-old son, what does it mean to be a good friend? And sometimes being a good friend is just being there and sitting next to someone and just letting them know I am there and I am listening. But that's true for all of us humans. But things like fixing people's problems, diagnosing people's problems, giving advice or correcting, even I think sort of an analyzing or defending is a form of sympathy and not empathy. And non-empathetic forms of communication are not heart connections.
Would you say, Summer, that when you think about empathy, does it take another level of vulnerability? Is that why you think it's difficult for people to tap into that?
You know, that's an excellent question. It does require vulnerability.
Yeah.
But I think it requires something more. I do not think you can pour from an empty cup. I think that to be empathetic of others, you have to have some proficiency and skill and self-empathy. And this is something that I don't hear people really talking about, which is like, how does Summer feel? What's going on in Summer's body? What are Summer's unmet needs? And then once I can answer and practice and get feedback in life from that, then I can show up for others. And that allows me to be, you know, as Larissa and Felice were saying, like present. Like there is nothing like presence.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I could go so many places with that, but let me follow my little script here of questions here. So, Dr. Whitney, you know, you have a interesting perspective because inherently in the work that you do, there's probably a high level of empathy being a doctor, a nurse practitioner working in the healthcare field. But there was a op-ed that came out in September 2020. It was published by the Scientific American newsletter titled "The U.S. Has an Empathy Deficit." So when you think, maybe even in your field, what do you think has caused this deficit of empathy? Or maybe you
I feel
see it differently. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, I feel like in healthcare, and I can speak from several different aspects. In healthcare, I feel like a lot of people are tired. You get fatigued. You get tired of, especially, and I know Miss Lee said something about it earlier, like where you have that, you're trying to compete with like helping, you know, doing being empathetic with your employees, but then also satisfying the higher ups. And what's going on, and I talk to people all the time, and a lot of nurses and a lot of nurse practitioners and a lot of healthcare professionals are leaving because they don't feel appreciated. You feel undervalued. I've left a job recently this year because, you know, due to COVID things, and I just told her, I said, you don't even do something as simple as make sure we have lunch. I said, do you know how disrespectful it is that you're walking around with lunch? We haven't even ate yet, you know, and you want me to work, you know, like a dog. And it's really just, you're not being empathetic. You're saying you are, and you write me nice little notes and you give me little peppermints and candy, but you're not being empathetic, and people are tired. And Summer brought up a really good point about pouring from an empty cup. And it's about when you deplete yourself and people still want you to pour and there's nothing to pour, you get that nasty side. And I loved how she said that. And I say that all the time. You can't, my mentor says that. How am I going to fill your cup if I don't have nothing to give you? Or a good analogy is when you're on a plane, you know, they tell you when the mask comes down, you got to put your mask on before you put it on your kid. It's the same thing. So I really liked how she said that. And I was like, ooh, I'm gonna bring that up. But that's really what it's about. And also people are nasty. Last year it was like the year of the nurse and the year of healthcare, and everybody loved healthcare professionals. And now it's just like, even at my job, I hear people say, I mean, I don't even know why we're doing this. I don't know why we're getting COVID tested. I think this is ridiculous. I don't even want to, sir, I just work here. I'm sorry you feel that way, you know, but it's like people are getting really rude and nasty, and you still have to smile. You still have to put a, you know, and I always tell my mom's like, just quit. I said, I can't. This is my life. I've always said I wanted to be in healthcare. I've always wanted to help people, and I can't just stop because there's a few bad apples and everybody has a nasty taste in their mouth. So,
Yeah. This is my say that finger. You said that. That's, if you see me doing that, that's what that means. Anyone else want to chime in on this? Why you think we have a empathy deficit, or maybe you have a different perspective on it?
I was going to share just from a corporate America perspective. So much of what Whitney shared, I too was a COVID work environment transition. And I think that this deficit for me from a corporate perspective has shown up because we are just so like seeking outside validation. There has been so much of a trick of what corporate America represents in our lives, or what jobs or careers mean. We've allowed them to define us a little bit too much. So for me leading teams, I tell my folks all the time, work can't matter more than real life. And I don't encourage people to separate their personal lives from work. We're human beings at work. Like, you don't walk into your office or now turn on your Zoom camera and stop being a mom, a wife, or a caregiver, or those things. You bring that with you, and then you have to do something for a person that's driving your pay. That's it. You don't get to separate those things. You should try your best to compartmentalize so you can get your work done, but you don't stop being that person at work. And when you think about this study about the deficit of empathy, it's because our society has become super validation and social driven. We believe everybody else has a better perspective than what our intuition and our gut is telling us. And that's just false. It's false. And we are also a society of like, it's not nice to care anymore. That's a weakness or something. There's something just broken in how we're living our lives. And I think the pandemic brought back a lot of that awareness for people. And for some of us, we no longer intend to separate from that. I will not get as busy as I was prior to the pandemic ever again in my life, because my family, that joy, I need to pour into them. I need to pour into myself. So I think it's just a matter of compartmentalizing, pacing yourself, asking yourself what it is I need to do for myself and others when you're thinking about demonstrating empathy. It is a learned behavior. You have to practice it every day.
So D'Angelo, if it's all right for me to hop in, Larissa, I really valued your answer, and I wanted to follow up with one of the questions we received from the audience. And so the question has to do with empathy itself and human connection. I totally agree with you that empathy is a human connection, but I need to clarify, in order for a person to be empathetic, does the person need to have the skills of emotional intelligence? I think this might be a great question for Dr. Chillen to answer.
Well, I think, so first of all, empathy is one of the competencies in the emotional intelligence model. So you don't have to actually have every competency of emotional intelligence to be empathetic. That would be superhuman, but empathy is a part of social intelligence and is an important part of that. I think that, I'm going to kind of piggyback on this to say that I think in this time, and we'll talk about emotional intelligence and also empathy in particular, people are going through a lot of pain. And I think it's really, really hard. And I guess it was Whitney that was talking about this. I think it's really hard when people are feeling so much pain for them to be nice, for them to be empathetic, for them to be, and for us to be empathetic. It doesn't matter. Like, I think it's hard for all of us, because when you're feeling a lot of pain and ambiguity, it's really hard to take on empathy if you're going to be in a fix-it mentality. And I think that's part of if you could somehow recognize that all you have to do as to be empathetic is listen, reflect back, and be there for the other person. Like I think somebody said here, being present for them. You don't have to fix it, but it's really easy to skip over that at a time when you're in pain and when others are in pain. So I have empathy for all the pain we're all feeling. And,
Deanna, I'd like just to add and lift up something Felice said. And I learned this through the book, My Grandmother's Hands, Resima Menakem's book. He talks about us blowing our pain and trauma through others. And I think I'm not only speaking about the United States. I have been stateside for a few years because of the pandemic, so I don't want to include other countries. But America, in the United States, I think we have a culture of acting out and a culture of blowing our trauma and pain through other people. And I think it circles back to this sort of concept of like, how do you take care of your own needs first?
Yeah. Oh, I'm getting chills. Great conversation. We have a question from an audience member, and so maybe she used my favorite. Okay. So when do you all think, and I would say y'all, when do y'all think we should use empathy versus compassion? Who wants to give us some thoughts on that?
I don't have a great answer, but I will say that for me, empathy is, compassion is empathy in action.
Yep.
That's how I see it.
Yep. I agree with you. Okay, so let's, Larissa, you started us off, and I want to dive more into this, right, about empathy in the workplace. So why is empathy important when it comes to workplace inclusion and belonging? Why do we need to have that? Why should organizations be focused on that?
Because it's the only way for organizations to thrive and continue. As a leader, if you show up and you forget that people are your asset, people generate the revenue, people think and ideate, that's why you're in business. You're not in business because of a piece of technology. You're in business because of human beings. So when you think about inclusion and belonging, the better we understand the people that work at our organizations, the better cultures we can create. I've worked in several cultures where the absenteeism of empathy and strong leadership has eroded an organization. I may age or date myself, but I worked for a company when I was younger, and I saw Enron go under, and I watched it implode because of poor leadership and a lack of inclusion and diverse thinking. Companies go under because folks don't listen to others with different perspectives.
Okay, so Felice, how does a workplace's philosophy around empathy impact how an organization engages their teams? Like, you're on mute right now.
So I had to think about this for a minute because I was a little bit like, what does that mean exactly? So I actually was thinking about it, and I thought, well, I'm not sure if it's the philosophy, because philosophies are so kind of abstract, as much as it is the kind of values that the company not only espouses, but the values that they actually validate in employees. So I think that if a company has values, and if they can validate them by supporting people's behaviors, it really works out great. Here's the thing, though, that's difficult. Organizations are kind of like their own organisms. It's called organization. It's like an organism. And sometimes those organisms don't really work the way us humans in them want to. It's kind of like when we're as individuals, we could be really empathetic, but there is something really to the fact that when we get into a group, we kind of create a group dynamic, and that group dynamic isn't always as empathetic as the individuals in it, So, and it's kind of it's a little woo-woo, but it does happen that the organizations have a hard time. But my example for this is that health systems often have empathy and compassion as a value. So the value's there, right? Everybody in the health system, a number of you work in healthcare, it's there as a value. We believe in it as individuals. We believe in it as a group. And yet the system itself is driven to do procedures and basically to be able to make money. It's a bottom line industry. And that really rubs against sometimes the empathy and compassion. I have a colleague who wrote a book recently. It's called Compassionomics. If you want to find that book, it's by Anthony Mazzarelli and Stephen Terziak. Anyway, what they write this whole book, and they talk about how empathy and compassion are part of are like a natural, they really like kind of heal people. The parasympathetic nervous system gets stimulated when you experience compassion or empathy. And their whole argument is that we could do the little bit of empathy you give to a patient will actually help heal the patient, even more than some of the procedures and all those things that you do. And it doesn't cost anything. So I think the whole idea that we look at compassion as part of the system, that it's part of it. And I think it's difficult. But I think the idea that we can actually be empathetic, support compassion, and at the same time we can still fulfill the goals of the organization. And really, realistically, in healthcare, the goal is to heal the patients. It's not to make money. So
No, I think you're onto something there. I mean, organizations saw higher levels of productivity and advocacy with team members last year because we were so empathetic to them going through COVID or racial trauma or what have you. And when organizations stopped that, we saw a decline in, and we now are seeing the great resignation because there was a heightened sense of empathy and compassion that we gave. And then all of a sudden we said, well, back to business as
We're
normal.
back, right.
And that wasn't
Stay in
helpful.
this thing. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
right.
Exactly. Okay, so let's see. This is for Summer and Larissa, and then Dr. Whitney, I got you coming up next. Okay, just to let you know, not leave me out there. And feel free to chime in, anyone, on any of the questions, of course. So no company or organization will state we are not empathetic, right? That's just not what they do. But how do organizations bridge the gap between between empathy and having a culture, espouse empathy and having a culture of empathy that employees not only hear about, but see and feel?
Summer, you want me to start? So I think I'm living this right now, D'Angelo. What I would tell you in my years of serving as a leader, the differentiator is hiring strong leaders. The biggest piece is making sure that you know what type of leaders to hire. So empathetic cultures you feel, as I think as Dr. Felice was saying, you think about culture, you have to embed it in how people behave. So culture is behavior in action. It's not fairy dust. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. It happens when the leaders show up every day and create those cultures. So for me, you cultivate that by hiring the right people. And you have to know what type of leaders you need to bring into an organization in order to drive what you're looking for from a culture standpoint. After you hire the right people, you have to hold them accountable to showing up every day as servant leaders. After you hold them accountable, you have to make sure they're clear on what it is you need them to deliver. If they're not clear on what they deliver, chaos, confusion ensues. And then it's harder for them to show up as servants because they're trying to scramble to figure out what to do. So it all starts first, root cause is hiring the right types of leaders. Second, holding them accountable as leaders and making sure they know here's what it is I expect from you behaviorally and the type of environment I'm expecting you to cultivate. And then lastly, providing clarity. Here's what I need you to do every day for our team, for our people, keep them engaged. It's a very simple recipe, but one of the hardest things that corporate America has not gotten right today.
I was like, simple recipe, but very aspirational. I'll say that, yes.
Absolutely.
Summer?
Yeah, I love what Larissa said. I think what I would add to that is really around the leadership piece, is that once you bring in the smartest people in society in a room to solve complex problems, you got to take care of them. And if you're not modeling these values that you're espousing, empathy, connection, communities of belonging, inclusion, if you're not modeling them, then the leader is going to get stuck. And so there's a wonderful speaker, she's the dean of Duke, Valerie Ashby Shears. She said this thing a few years ago to me. She said, it's not a secret how you become great. So like, there's some boxes we all have to check to, get some skills, learn generally how to show up and how to do the work you're hired to do, even to go above being outstanding at your role. And that is, people need therapy, people need coaching, and thirdly, people need mentorship. And now it's not a prescription that like you have to do all these things all the time, D'Angelo, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if you haven't sat down with someone to really look at your internal monologues and your archetypes, right? If someone's skilled, able to do that, it's like good mental hygiene. So you got to do that. At some point, if you haven't done it, you got to do it. And I suggest you probably should do it more than several times. And then coaching, leadership coaching. I mean, I'm sure Felice could really educate us on this too, but like there is nothing like being in the moment with the person in the crisis and coaching them. So you can talk about the values, but you actually have to push in with some support. And then the third thing I think is sometimes missed is mentorship. It's like someone who's invested in you on a macro level, that's tracking you over years. It's not really into what you're doing further down the funnel. but is really able to point out trends and patterns to you that impact your family, that impact your servant leadership. So I always hearken back to what the dean said, and I think that's right. That is the trifecta. That is how to go from Summer Pool 1.0 to 2.0, or Larissa 1.0 to 2.0. This is how you keep these leaders and keep them growing.
And can I just add something, D'Angelo, as a leader? I would tell you, in the last 5 years of my career, what Summer just articulated has been, I would say, the blueprint for me going from a manager to a leader. I had a suite of mentors. I had a suite of sponsors. I had a network of people that were on the team of improving Larissa's leadership. And I will just tell you, that is invaluable. Something that I keep on retainer, and I am not ashamed to say, coaching and therapy are table stakes. Like, there's so much, especially during the pandemic. As a leader, I had to get therapy. I had to learn how to show up virtually for my teams in order to keep them engaged. I couldn't start staff meetings with, here's what we got, the agenda. Staff meetings shifted from, here's the check-in. And I was able to do that because I was working with an executive coach that helped me stay grounded. And then I was going through my own therapy to deal with my own trauma and issues and anxiety of what was going on in the world that I needed help processing and unblocking. So when you think about committing to kind of what Summer shared as that blueprint, you have to subscribe and enlist yourself that there is no end point to that. You're always going to continue growing and evolving as a leader, and you need a team of people invested in helping you do that. And they have to be able to give you feedback that you can process. Don't surround yourself with people that tell you you're awesome. If you do that, you're destined to fail. Surround yourself with people that give you constructive feedback that help you become the best version of yourself.
Yeah. Whitney, I saw you shaking your head. Did you want to chime in there?
I absolutely love that, especially in my role with mental health. A lot of people, when I speak to them about therapy, like I'm telling them, like, medication is good, but you also need that therapy piece to connect the dots of things that you don't really understand, or you might have a misinterpretation about, like she said, talking about your own traumas and being able to process. This is a different type of world. And like, I have people who are normal social butterflies who are telling me now, like I was speaking earlier, now they have social anxiety. I have people who say, oh, I used to go to this gathering, I used to be a socialite, and now I can't even be in a room with four. I had a patient yesterday tell me being in a room with over 4 to 5 people creates a high level of anxiety. But also, when you talk about therapy, there's such a stigma around therapy that people, when I tell them, I'm like, no, therapy, you need to get into it. They're like, I mean, but I don't want people to look at me. I don't care what people say. Like, therapy is that key component that you need. I started therapy this year, and I tell you, it's been one of the best arsenals, like pieces of my arsenal that I have. Just being able to process. And sometimes she says things, and I'm like, dang, where did you get that from? Or like, even when you brought up the mentorship, I have a wonderful mentor, and she digs into me. It's not no, oh, you're doing a great job, let me give you a participation trophy. It is a no, what are you doing today? What did you do yesterday? I know you're tired, but don't tell me you want to do this if you want to get here. So I love Summer. I love you brought that up. I'm over here writing it down. I'm like, telling my patients this, because that's really what it's about. You're creating their best version. And I love those pieces that was beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Summer. When I think about my moment last year when I decided I need to have all three was when I was facilitating a session for the organization on making good trouble. And I literally, at the end of the session, talking about George Floyd, I literally broke out in tears and had to go off camera because here I was not helping the organization navigate what does it mean to support your Black associates. And I was a Black associate who needed support. And so I had to give me a mentor, which I already had, but I finally went to therapy, which was an awesome thing to help me and my relationship with another Black man, that my partner, right? And so I just need to that energy that we had in the house together and experiencing that together. We both needed someone else to additionally talk to around that. So thank you for sharing that, for sure. Oh, gosh, Lee. Okay. So many places to go here, but with this conversation because it's so rich. Because someone did talk about, and we'll try to get to that. Someone did talk about managing fatigue, and so maybe we'll save that to the very end to kind of talk about that just a little bit. Okay, so Dr. Whitney and Felice, how have you seen the impact of empathy or lack of empathy show up within the past 2 years? I mean, we've talked a lot about it, but any points of views you all have that you think empathy has changed in the past 2 years? I think it's been in waves for me, but you all share your views on that.
Like we spoke about prior, it's just people are just going back to the fatigue too. You're just so, and it kind of goes back to what you just said about having that trifecta, having that empty cup, being fatigued. It's just like everyone just has a chip on their shoulder. It's like, and I think Miss Larissa brought it up earlier. From an organizational standpoint, I like how you said that people need this validation and social media. I used to do like the children, I did the teens at church, like taught. And one thing I find very interesting about them is it's all about social media. And well, you know, so-and-so said this and so-and-so did this and so-and-so did this and so-and-so's making $1 million doing this. And I'm like, okay, cool, but what are you doing? And I think sometimes we get caught up on social media because, and it makes us less empathy, you know, like you just feel like you have to compete with other people. And then you're like, oh, I'm giving too much time to this. I'm giving too much time to you when I need to be doing something else. But sometimes you're seeing people's end result versus you're on step 1, they're on step 25. And that's very important. And also going back to empathy too, I just feel like and like I said, I've never thought about it until Miss Larissa said it. It's just like having that validation. And it's important to be empathetic because like me as a nurse practitioner, I'm always empathetic. Like I used to work in the NICU, the neonatal ICU with the preemies. I'm always empathetic. I've been with people in their best days where they've not been able to get pregnant, or we're sitting here like praying that your baby lives, to where, you know, we have the not so good days where we're watching, you know, your miracle child pass. And it's just about being there. And people are just so not in touch with other people. Like I heard a nurse say in a chat room, like, sometimes I don't even get my meds. I'm like, why? Like, you're in the wrong field. Like, you know, it is, I don't care. And it goes back to that validation. I don't care if I get that validation. I'm here for you. I don't care if I don't get lunch. I'm gonna be mad about it, but I'm here for you. You are my number one priority, myself included with my self-care. But I'm just like, I just don't understand how you can be in such a profession and not care. You know, I'm like, did you not read what nursing was about, or did you not read what healthcare is about? That's day one. That's 1-on-1. You should have thought about that before you paid the money. And that's how I always think about it. Like what, like people are selfish, and it's hard to get people to be empathetic.
Dr. Felice, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it is really frustrating, as Whitney said. And I think that's kind of part of the issue is that, again, and I've said this before, that we're in a real, I don't know that we've ever been in a time where we're more polarized, where uncertainty has been more clear. Like there is clearly a way forward and it is uncertain. It's, you know, we have no idea if we're going to be locked down next week or not. We have no idea if Omicron is going to be nothing or if it's going to be something. We have no idea if people are going to, you know, what's going to happen on the streets. We just don't know. We're all in this kind of space of ambiguity and often pain, and it's very hard to let anything else in. And I think in some ways the way I could help other people be empathetic is as difficult as it is to be empathetic to them, you know? So if I'm seeing, so it's kind of like, if I'm going to play any role in changing anybody's behavior, I need to try to understand their worldview, and, you know, in order for them to bring their guard down and all that, I just can't, you know, be frustrated with it myself. So that's the work, as people were talking about, the therapy, the coaching, all the support people need to kind of be in that place, because it's not easy. it's just not easy. This is not an easy time. And I think that it's up to us as individuals to do what we can around it. And, you know, I can't expect a lot from anybody anymore. It's almost like I can expect something from myself. And I hope that, you know, there's kind of like the little lights that shine. There is actually a lot of evidence that if you're in a good place, if you're empathetic, if you're practicing acts of compassion in an authentic way, then it will spread. And I want to believe that's true. And I don't have evidence that it's not true. It's just not been massive enough, you know?
I have something to add to this part of the conversation. There's he's dead now. He was a psychologist and social justice activist named Marshall Rosenberg. He started this work called Nonviolent Communication, which I'm really a big fan of. But he said this thing that always has stuck with me, which is whenever anyone ever does anything or says anything, they're saying one of two things. They're saying please or thank you. Please help me. Please, I don't understand. Please, I'm stuck. Or showing gratitude and saying thank you. And that stuck with me for so long. He has a wonderful book called Nonviolent Communication, A Language for Life. Is that our role as coaches, as bosses, as parents, is to see the angel, the divinity, and everybody. Especially when there's bad behavior. And that's really hard to do. It's like chunk up and listen for what people really need. Because, you know, I actually don't think the non-vaxxers who refuse to wear a mask are actually assholes. I mean, they are in a way, but I actually think it doesn't mean that they're not empathetic. I think it means that they have some needs that aren't being met and they're asking for something. And so when someone shows up, and I believe in science, I'm on getting my booster here this weekend. I respect people have different opinions, but I want you to know where I stand. I try to listen with a different ear, be present with a different ear, to chunk up above the bad behavior so I have an attempt to making a connection. Yeah, that's what I want to say.
No, I love that. So many things here. I appreciate that you shared that. I want to get some questions in from people who are putting in the chat box here. Can we talk a little bit about fatigue? And anyone can chime in on this question. What's one thing you've done this year to help yourself or your team members to balance fatigue, right? What's one thing you've done that we can share with people who may want to help their own teams or work groups or colleagues out with fatigue?
I tell people to take your PTO, use your PTO. I was always one of them people who, like, when I left my jobs, I had a bank full of PTO. And I always tell people, take that vacation. I mean, it's good at the end because I'm like, oh, look at this money. But I'm just like, that's time that I could have been resetting, clearing my mind, stepping away. And I also tell people self-care, whether it be massages. I made it, because I work all the time. I'm always like, you know what I'm gonna do? Every 2 weeks, I'm gonna go get a pedicure. Just something random I decided to do. And that just helps me clear my mind. And I sit there and I listen to the music and I'm sitting there just talking. And I'm not talking about healthcare because I won't talk about that when I'm in there. So I think just stepping away and encouraging people to do the same. Like I always tell people, girl, that's fine. Take your PTO. We'll be fine. Don't, because some people make you feel guilty for wanting to be like, well, I just need to step away. Don't feel guilty. Take that time that you need and get reset. Take vacations if you can.
I'll go back to something I said at the beginning. Work doesn't matter more than real life. Like, just very basic for me. As a person on the corporate side, I don't work in healthcare. I will tell you, I start every day with either a list of 3 to 5 things I'm going to accomplish. I do not have long to-do lists. That's just setting you up for failure. Shorten your to-do list. It's stupid. Just nobody's giving you a cookie for doing 30 things. It's dumb. Just shorten the to-do list, 3 to 5 things, so that you reaffirm for yourself that you're productive, that you've added value. I'll echo what Whitney talked about. I suffered a major mental corporate breakdown because I didn't take time off to help and take care of my body. You have to listen to your body. It will tell you, it sends you warning signs that you are fatigued. As a leader, I check in with my team. Hey, how are you doing? Do you have capacity to do that? Are you okay? You have to create space to check in and listen to hear how people are feeling and how they're handling things. I do not over expect from my teams. I tell them, we're not saving the world. We're not Dr. Fauci. We didn't have to come up with a vaccine or anything. I work at a place that creates video games. It'll be here tomorrow. Like, you have to help people set perspective. 3 to 5 things, that's it. Don't overdo it. Work does not matter more than real life. When we all expire and leave this world, our tombstones, our headstones will not read anything about where we worked. It'll tell you the date you were born, when you left, and if your family loved you, it'll say loving wife, mother, daughter, or whatever. Fingers crossed. That's the part you work on, not the work part.
Whew, Larissa, I needed to hear that. Thank you. That was a sermon for me. I have 20 things on my to-do list, and I think I'm gonna try to cut it down to 3 to 5. I think that really landed in my body. Thank you for saying that. And I think what I would like to add to that is modeling behavior. You can't talk it and not walk it, right? So what Whitney was saying about getting her manicure, I think and for what I do on my team is I narrate when I'm struggling. So when you want to talk about what real vulnerability is, for me, real vulnerability is showing up, talking about something that I have not spent time talking about in therapy or with my friends, that I haven't actually always worked out, but in the moment that I'm able to be present and say, this is what's happening to me. My heart is racing, I'm multitasking, I am distracted. I can't be present to this meeting. I'm gonna leave this meeting and trust that you guys can continue it because I need a break. I mean, those type of things I have gotten feedback from my staff are powerful. So modeling all these self-care things, but also demonstrating what is going on, giving some sort of voice to it. I once heard this story about a Buddhist who was going through Alzheimer's late in his life, and he got in front of the stage and he drew a blank, could not speak. And so he did that exact thing. He started talking about what was happening to him. He spoke for 20 minutes. And then actually he kind of remembered what he was there to talk about. And before he can even start that, people gave him a standing ovation. It's this is the best education that I've actually ever, thank you for this gift, for telling me what it's like to be you and teaching me in the moment. So I always harken back to that and think how can I show up and model and tell people, because this is a well-oiled machine from afar many days. And so I don't believe in sort of pretending that it's easy, that it's always pretty. It ain't always graceful.
Yeah. Summer, I love that. I hosted a radio show in my past life, and I would give out side eyes to people. And one time I had to give a side eye to myself for racking up 400 hours of vacation time. And so my side eye was take a break, right? I know, don't whole life, but I love that. And there was a question about that. How do we make people feel comfortable admitting it? And it is really being vulnerable yourself, right? With your teams. Hey, here's what I'm experiencing. Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left. There is a question here I want to get in really quickly for Whitney, and then let's close out with some kind of final thoughts from each of you. Okay, so one of the strategies I use with my nursing students in the clinical field is not to bring home issues with them, and to treat their patients as if they were members of their family. I think this is a difficult thing here, but do you agree with this step is what the question is.
I agree wholeheartedly. I will say sometimes it's hard to bring not so much now because I've gotten better at it, but when I first started, I would come home and I worked night shift, of course, and I would cry. I would be like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened today. Or because you see so traumatic things. Like I tell people, like we've had to deliver. We've been first on the scene and have delivered like 26-week twins, and you're putting them on your chest. Empathy, like, and I've cried. Um, but it's hard not to bring it home. And I try to tell people, if I'm talking about it too much, please tell me to shut up. And I always say that. Like if I'm going overboard with it, because I can, I'm like, please tell me, let's talk about something else. Or give me some food, one of the two. But like it's like I have to it bringing it home, and like I'm empathetic and I bring it home. I used to bring it home really, really bad. Because I just like, oh my God, this baby needs me. Their mom left them. They need me to be their mom. I need to adopt them. I used to think stuff like that. So it's hard not to bring it home, but I do agree you cannot bring it home. And I do agree when I say you treat them people like they're your family members. Going back to what I said about people not lacking empathy, when my grandparents, my mom, any family members in the hospital, I show up. I don't tell people I'm in the healthcare field. I want to see what your reaction is. And then if it's something that I feel like is done accordingly, I'm like, pause. So by the way, I'm a nurse practitioner, and that's not how that works. Because I treat you like you are my family. If you come in, I know you on your first name. I can tell you about your life. There's patients, I haven't been in the NICU for about 4 years now. There's patients I'm still friends with on Facebook. I can see them in public. They write me. I can ask them about their family members. Um, because you're family to me. And I expect the same thing. I don't expect you to add us on Facebook and stuff, but I do expect you to treat my family with respect. And I do expect you to provide the most highest level of care and be their advocate. That's really huge. I expect you to be compassionate, empathetic, and be an advocate. If you can't do that, then I'll do the nursing stuff myself and I'll just tell you what to chart and I'll make a complaint. I do
Thank
that
you.
all the time.
Yeah, no, and that helps with that process for so many families. All right, so let's close out really quickly here. What do you want people to walk away with from this session? Dr. Felice, we'll start with you. What do you want people to take away from this session? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got it. So I hope this has, I hope that people walk away thinking and feeling and experiencing more about this. I know I'm walking away with a lot here as well, especially in the kind of area of self-care. But I just hope you walk away with a keen sense of interest and reflection on yourself and on others, and kind of the gift that you could bring. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Larissa, how about you?
I would say for me, just recommit to being a joyful human being. Like the more you commit to anabolic energy, the more you commit to being the best version of yourself, the better things around you get. But you have to just commit to it and make it a daily practice.
Thank you. And Summer?
I think I want to leave this idea with folks that empathetic connection is not cognitive and it's not intellectual. It's a heart connection.
Thank you. Whitney, anything you want to add?
I piggyback off everything everyone says. I have really good feedback. I just want to leave people with, I always say, God says, love everybody and he'll do the rest. And I think that's where I'm at with it. You just love everybody. People used to say, you treat people like you want to be treated. I don't want you to treat me like you treat yourself, because some people treat themselves my mom gets mad when I say that, but I always say that some people, because some people, you're the hardest on yourself. I want you to love me. I'm going to love everybody else. I love my community. Commit to your best self, be your best version, and put out positive energy, and you'll get that in return.
Yeah. And I'll leave with my favorite quote by Maya Angelou. She says, people may not remember what you did, what you said, but they will always remember the way you made them feel. And so I tell all leaders, if one thing you can do is just check in with your team members, call them today and say, how are you doing? Your friends, your family, your colleagues. If you just do that often, that's the first step in having and showing empathy. So thank you to Dr. Whitney, Dr. Felice, Larissa, and Summer for joining us today, and Dr. Carla and Dr. Tanya O'Neill for having us all here. I'm going to turn this back over to you all, gracious hosts. But thank you so much to the Realize Leadership Group for having us here today.
It has been our pleasure. And thank you so much for engaging in this meaningful conversation. This is something that RLG is committed to hosting for practitioners, for scholars, for those that are in this field alike. We are taking a break for the rest of 2021, but we'll be picking back up in January of next year. And so if you would like to attend, we would love to have you. It's been interesting to see the questions come forward and how this conversation has really shifted from when we first started doing this, I'd say about 8 months ago. And so I'm really looking forward to continuing to engage in these discussions. And if you would like to attend, keep an eye out on our website or keep an eye out on our LinkedIn page. You can certainly reach out to us. Our website is listed up on the screen above, realizeleadershipgroup.com. And as a reminder, we did receive this question in the chat feature. So a recording of tonight's event is available. Please look out for an email for those who registered to attend and those who were able to join, as well as those who might have missed this for whatever reason. You'll receive an automated email that you can just notify us that you'd like a copy of the recording. And so that'll be available and in the public domain. But for our panelists and for our guest moderator, thank you so much for your authentic conversation. You're engaging in this and truly phenomenal work, and you're giving some unique tidbits that I know everyone present is walking away a little bit richer, a little bit more informed. And so thank you so much for your time during a busy life, busy day. Please enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we'll be back soon.